All right, we're live.
I don't know, your former employer, maybe.
And was that an invitation for us to come up?
Yes, why don't you come up? Always a pleasure. So we will, we are live.
Excuse me, meeting here in front of you. Now, usually, we're in front of our witnesses.
So we're going to get started. We were late getting off the floor, so we actually have canceled out the veterans home. And we'll reschedule. They were going to be remote anyway. So we're going to start with the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. We have Scott Giles here and also Marilyn Targill, who is presenting on behalf of VSAC. So welcome. Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify, and we're mindful that this is a Friday afternoon after a long week, so we'll be, I think, direct and to the point with regard to our testimony. And what we thought we would do, just by kind of way of introduction and orientation, unless obviously the committee would do something different, is just do a very brief kind of reminder of kind of VSAC and the range of programs that we're delivering, and then we'll turn immediately into the kind of state-funded programs and the core of our budget request, and be prepared to answer questions that you might have about what elements were contained within the recent.
That's good, because we really just need to keep kind of focusing on the highlights. And
one of the observations that I'll make at the very outset before we go, kind of go into this is just the observation that we're mindful that you have a very challenging job in front of you, that money is going to be tight this year and tight going into the future. And so our budget request this year is actually very, very focused, and we'll highlight kind of the importance of it, but I'll open up just by leading with one piece. 2 years ago, you funded a new program called Leadership to Opportunity, which initially allowed any student coming from a family earning $50,000 or less to attend CCD tuition fee-free. In the second year, you increased that income threshold to $75,000. Marilyn is going to share just how successful that program has been, and to kind of open the conversation, which Marilyn will close. The core of the biggest request that we're making is that was funded with general fund one-time dollars in those last 2 years. We're asking that, given the success of the program, that it be made permanent and included within our base. So with that as an intro, I'll turn.
did the governor propose that?
The governor proposed
One time?
continuing it with one time, and the House included it with the base. So I'm just going to jump really quickly because.
Well, let me ask you if you have an opinion. Obviously, the other part of our Vermont State College systems really are in a very challenging environment with a transformation plan. And so the other group of students that would probably go through a different track, and this is getting into Vermont State colleges as opposed to VSAC, would be in the critical occupations area. So I don't know whether that was discussed or not, but I know this is a continuation of an initiative that was started out with a foundation. The state has continued, but there's been some discussion about what group of students and how they're supported toward which policy goal. But I suppose you want to support all students and perhaps be a little more agnostic about which ones are treated differently or get covered and what gets covered.
And I'd be happy to kind of weigh in, and maybe what we can do is kind of walk through a little bit of our presentation, come back to the opportunity. That creates an opportunity for us, I think, to talk about who's being served, what impact we think that's having, and then we can. And part of what I will share is that one of the things that we're pleased about is that this initiative is one that is supported universally, by the higher education community. It's supported by the university it's supported by the sort of the state university, and Maryland will be able to share some numbers.
Well, it's a wonderful pipeline. The one thing that I think, and collectively, we talk about Vermont and blah, 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 but in fact, we passed that childcare bill and the level of childcare assistance that we're paying for young families certainly should be attractive. What we're doing for free tuition, also our senior year, which allows students to get the first year of college free. Nobody talks about, those are very, very, it will be very substantial.
Dual enrollment.
And the dual enrollment on top of, the senior year, are just incredible benefits that I don't think many states replicate. And yet we don't pay enough attention to the way in which we're supporting families and students. But I think we, some of what we're doing with high school certification and completion and what we follow up high school, I don't know, maybe we can change our our continuation rate. But it just seems like we never really give enough attention to some of the things that are so attractive about the state.
Well,
You don't even need to comment. I'm making a comment because people are listening, hopefully. And I think sometimes we do things in a variety of ways and people aren't necessarily connecting them. So I just thought I would use the opportunity.
into that end, I would say that, 802 Opportunity is one example of a research-based initiative designed to address with some of the issues that you articulated. And as we'll share it shortly. From our perspective, been a resounding success. And a resounding success, as Marilyn will, not just for traditional age students, but also primarily working adults who are earning just enough money not to be aid eligible, but not earning enough to be able to afford the education to get the credential that they need in order to make that next kind of step in the
And let me ask, while I'm on the trades program, because the House added a certificate program at the state college system in 3D technology. And I'm just wondering, are we doing any of it here with your list of trades and programs?
So
I know I'm jumping around. I don't follow any script. You must know that.
We came in prepared and we had drawing straws as to whether it would take 2 minutes or 5 minutes before we started responding to the friendly questions from the committee that knows as well.
yes,
So who won? All right, go ahead, Mary.
so the trades program, the way it's currently structured, it will cover any short-term training or education program. So I believe the program that they're talking about is less than 2 years. And so trades would be able to help cover the expense of that program for a student. So we're covering some of the VTC traditional 2-year programs. We're covering certificate programs at all of the institutions. What we're not covering with trades money is the 4-year bachelor's degrees, because those students have access to Pell Grants and VSAC grants and other sources of funding. A lot of the forgivable loan programs are targeted to the 4-year programs. So trades is looking for training, short-term training programs and short-term education programs.
Was there something,
Just go ahead.
was there something added about emergency services in the trades?
Yeah, so trades was, when it first was put forth last year, it was really focused. It was mechanical trades, it was building trades, construction trades, and medical trades. And then when it got into the legislature, it was opened up pretty broadly, and emergency trades or emergency services was called out individually. And that last year. And then at the very end, the statement was added, and any other critical needs areas, which pretty much opened it up to just about anything in the state of Vermont, because when we asked the Department of Labor what career areas are not a critical need in the state of
In this
Vermont,
workforce environment, probably not.
well, they came back seriously. They said it would be easier for, we couldn't tell you what is, but we can tell you what isn't. And there were 17 careers that came back that they said were not critical need. And the only one that's sticking in my head right now, I believe, is a funeral director. All other, and there was 16 beyond that. So there, it really is that pretty much anything in the state of Vermont is now considered a critical needs area. And then, so we said, all right, so we'll only look at short-term training programs so that we can focus this money on.
Does that mean our old people aren't dying?
I don't know how to, I did not challenge, but I was given Senator Westminster information.
I do think that it has changed.
Yeah.
Certainly cremation has become the dominant.
Yeah.
And then,
That's the cremations.
you
You don't
can,
need a funeral director.
you don't need a funeral director. I discovered that. Poor Gil went on his way for $830.
Oh,
Yeah.
geez.
And delivered in a cardboard box in a back of a pickup truck to the crematory.
Wow.
So,
Vermont frugality.
I know, that's why I'm chairing this committee.
Yeah. Good point.
Oh, boy, so yes, you actually, you can, and there are more green burials and, so the way in which we approach death.
It would have cost you probably that much to get into the hospital. If you had to have gone to the hospital from Danville to St. J, it'd be $700-800 for that.
At least that.
Unfortunately, we were able to,
He was lucky.
yeah, he was lucky. So, all right, well, that's an interesting bit of information, Marilyn. We will, so maybe we'll get back to your budget request. You would like to move the 802 opportunities into the base. That's an ongoing benefit to Vermonters.
Indeed, and what I'm thinking, you have our testimony in front of us and you know us well, the full range of services that we're providing, so I'm not gonna take any time touching on that. Marilyn, why don't we just jump right into the 802 opportunity and the budget request?
So what we've seen with the 802 opportunity in the very first year is that during that first year, community colleges across this nation lost enrollment. That was just standard.
We did.
We did not.
Right.
We did not. And CCB attributes this program, along with some of the other initiatives from the legislature, but they attribute this program to preventing that from occurring in the state of Vermont. We saw that the majority of students who took advantage of this program, 75% of them were first gen. They were the first person in their family to go on to college. 72% of them are adults, so it's very much looking at our adult population.
Well, CCD, does align better with adult schedules and work and in terms of flexibility.
They certainly do, but they are definitely growing in traditional population. Now that 28% of those students are traditional students, as we would think of them, that 18 to 22-year-olds. The thing that surprised me, 17% of the people who received 802 opportunity identified as a person of color or Hispanic. So again, I think your Community College of Vermont sites sit in areas where we have larger immigrant populations and new American populations. So I think that's playing out. Once these students started taking courses, they were really committed. So 83% of the students who started the course successfully completed it. So they stuck with those courses. We weren't losing a lot of students to attrition.
How does that compare to your other students?
I think, Scott, do you know what?
I have to come back for kind of broad-based numbers, but those would be very high.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm looking at this other one, Vermont Advancement Grant, 35 years old and female. The whole percentage of male-female student population has changed so dramatically, unless you went to a women's college. It's all 100% women, but now 60-40, and maybe even growing.
I heard UV Evans down in the 30s.
Yeah.
70-30?
Well, high 60s and low 30s.
Yeah, I can say in my classes, it's 3/4 female.
Yeah.
So it's
And
just the opposite.
And as a teaser on this particular topic, we're actually releasing some research showing what's happening in gender continuation rates, particularly looking at first generation boys. Coming out of the pandemic, where there's some significant issues that we're going to need to address. Before turning back, I was going to make just one observation here that kind of tags back to I think part of the question you were asking kind of earlier in the process. One of the things that kind of led to the creation of this program, if you remember, was that we talk a lot about the high school graduation rates and relatively low college continuation rates across the country. When we dug into the data really deeply to better understand what was happening, what we saw was that our 4-year college going rate is actually above the national average, but our 2-year college going rate was about half the national average. Part of that is a regional phenomenon. So if you look in New England, you see some of that distortion, but ours was really dramatic, even relative to New England. And the reason, in part, that we came back to you with the idea of aided to opportunity was to target resources towards the area in that continuation rate where we saw the biggest gap.
Right. The only last thing I'll say on this, and we can move on. Part of the reason the 802 opportunity and CCV was so appealing was because CCV, I think you mentioned this, is a pipeline. So we have students that are getting credentials at CCV, we've got students that are getting associate degrees, and we have a number of students that use CCV for their first 2 years, and then using consortium agreements, move on to one of the other state colleges or UVM.
That's a very affordable path.
It's a very affordable path, and now with 802 opportunity, it's incredibly affordable. UVM actually lists CCV as their single largest source of transfer students. So this is actually working in all kinds of different ways. It's working for our schools, it's working for our families. And the messaging on this, if your income is under $75,000, you go to CCV tuition free. There's no small print on that. So it's something that families really got the first year and started using it and are using it even more so this year. Because the first year, remember, it was a $50,000 income cutoff, and you last year increased that to $75,000.
So how many, let's see, what was the total number of students? We've got the percentage.
It was out of 2,109, I believe. Yeah, 2,109.
21. Maybe it's on the sheet, I could be looking at it, but
It's on page 7, it's the very last
I'm on
bullet.
page 8.
The
Oh,
majority,
21.
the majority of those students go on to a 4-year.
I don't think so. I think it's really going to end up being a really big mix of, there's a lot of students that go to CCV for a credential. That is what they are after. There's another group that's really after that associate's degree. Associates in like bookkeeping, for example, is another program that's really popular. And then there is a group, and this is the group that's growing right now, is people who are very purposely starting at CCV, but their intent is always to get a 4-year degree. So I think, you know, certainly President Judy would be the right person to ask that question of, but that's the group that we have seen grow over the last few
And
years.
because of so many sites, students can live at home, which also makes it much more affordable as well.
Right.
Yeah, I was wondering, you work a lot with high schools and their people there. Have you ever tried to figure out why our young men won't go or care about going on to higher ed for some reason?
There was a great article a few years ago called Failure to Launch, Senator Starr. And it talked about, it actually was a look examining the data around why our boys are not doing well in that traditional classroom setting. And the finding was that the way in which those traditional methods of teaching they're not effective, particularly for the male learner. And so they talked about the need for more applied learning, and that's what you get in CTE, and how to make what they're learning more relevant to their lives and, you know, their future. So it was a very interesting discussion around, and that's what I think we attempted to do a number of years ago when we passed the, sort of that individualized learning plan was to recognize those different learning styles and what's effective. And maybe we could find out more about that, but
Well,
it's a real challenge, Bobby.
if we know what the problem is, what are we doing to solve that problem? And because it's nice to educate all you wonderful women, but it'd be also nice at the
They can
same
have
time,
marriageable,
a couple of gentlemen get educated.
well, that was the purpose of this legislation, was to do that kind of, to better match the educational approach to the individual student. But I don't know if, do we have any,
Well,
maybe we ask education on that when they come in.
I mean, I would say the personalized learning plans, as brilliant a future as we envisioned for it, in the application, it has really suffered. Like, you know, I've talked to my daughters as they've gone through the process.
Becomes very pro forma and boring.
And often ignored completely until almost graduation. You know, so my daughter's friends now are all coming up to graduation. They're all picking these things up for first time in a year and a half, trying to fill out what they. So, you know, also Burlington, to take one district, turned them into advisory sessions and then use them that time for, you know, team building, like pizza parties and playing board games. And I said, did you ever have anybody explain dual enrollment to the advisory? No, never mentioned. So it's turned into just a kind
So it
of
was
study.
theoretically, it seemed like it would
Yeah.
be an effective, but in practice.
In fact, just one last anecdote. They just did an April Fool's edition of the Register at Burlington High, and my daughter writes for it. And so the cover story was student uses advisory to work on PLP plan. And you know, if you read the story, everybody's worried about the person. You know, is something wrong? Why is he actually doing this PLP? So
Yeah, that's been my experience with the PLP. But I think what has helped with boys is the alternative pathways where you could
yeah.
go out in school, learn in high school, so you don't have to be in class.
And that also works, extracurricular learning also works with minorities, and it has worked in the upper women. So it's interesting how we just make this cycle.
Well, it's interesting, that's true. And that's why growing up on a farm actually is the best classroom
Yeah.
anyone could have, because it's
You know,
and it's applied learning
any
from
direction.
birth. So, well, anyway, it's always interesting to come to this committee, isn't it? Because, you know, our stream of consciousness is broad,
Limited.
unlimited. Our attention span might be limited, but you know, whatever. So what else would you like to tell us that we haven't already done out of sequence?
You want to go ahead and jump to the trades?
So you want a base appropriation, we
So
got
yeah, we're
that.
looking at that, and then we've also asked for an additional appropriation for the trades program of $1 million. Last year, trades had $3 million in it with a provision that anything that was unspent could be rolled forward. So that program went live in September of 22, so just barely, it's 8 months old, it's a very new program. And we've spent right now about 1.3 million of those dollars, which is unbelievable for a brand new program. Like, it didn't exist and this many students have already found it and using it. So what we're thinking for next year is that this program will grow, but we are going to have at least $1 million or $1.5 million to move forward, to roll forward. If we have an additional $1 million, that will allow that program to continue. And there's your short-term training programs for those boys, for example, that may not want to be going on to a 2 or 4 year school, but we all know at this table, they have to do something beyond high school if they're going to actually be able to earn a livable wage and stay in Vermont. So this program is really targeted to all students, but certainly those first generation boys that are right now we're just losing them.
Well, that would be very interesting to see how that progresses, because one of the things we've focused, incentives to bring people here. But as I've said before, we've got some human capital in the form of our youth. And I don't know how many, several thousand actually, where they are just sort of marginalized relative to the workplace. And we can't neglect the resources that we have right here. And it seems like the trades program would be one of the strategies to get that group of youth because if they're discarded so early, their whole earning career and lifetime is still ahead of them. So so the trades, how many students in fact benefited from that?
166 students are using about $1.25 million. And this program, as I said, this isn't on a traditional calendar. It's not about a fall, spring semester. It can be
Okay.
any trade program that starts at any point. So we'll be spending this money right through the end of June. And I'm anticipating that we'll have committed about half of the funds.
So what is the provider of these services? Who's getting paid to do this?
The folks that are offering the training itself. So in some cases, it's VTC because some of their programs qualify, not all. CDL schools are receiving this training. We don't have lineman school in Vermont, but there are a number of students that are going to Georgia. We're paying those institutions. So we are paying full tuition at the institution that the student has found. Vermont Welding School is another group that's receiving funds from this program so that students can afford that particular training
I'm
option.
really glad we're doing the lines with some stuff. There's only, I think there's 3 in the country, and most of the utility companies are starting.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
And they really pay good.
Right, those are really good jobs and we have students that are interested in them, so.
So this isn't a complete list, this is just a list.
So if you look for where energy trades is where we would put someone going to lineman school. We're putting them in the larger buckets of the types of programming that it is. Medical trades, for example, could be anything from respiratory therapy to phlebotomy to any program that is less than a 4-year program.
Where do
And
you
what's the
go
benefit?
for the lab tech and phlebotomy and all that? In Vermont, is
Yeah.
that where?
UVM has lab tech,
But
Norwich does,
VTC have lab tech?
they probably don't. It's a very intense, rigorous program.
I don't know off the top of my head.
We did?
Plumbing in here, is that?
Plumbing would be in here, electrician, building trades, construction trades are in here. One of the schools that we work with for that is Yestermorrow. That's one of the groups that has a fairly strong training program.
And what's the benefit? What is the benefit that this program pays?
This program pays full tuition. And it will also pay for exam and licensing fees. Because one of the things, I believe it was CCB raised, was that because frequently in a training program, you have to get your actual exam outside of the training program itself, and then you have to be licensed by that external group. It was a different funding source. And so students would maybe graduate with the credential they needed, but if it was another $300 or $400 or $500 to actually get the license they needed, they couldn't afford to do it.
Is it means tested?
This is a need-based program.
All right, other questions? Office of Child and Youth Family Advocate.
Million in here somewhere.
Yes, so I am gonna move, if folks are happy with that, I'm gonna move all the way to page 12, which is our actual request. All right. If you want to put that on the floor, sure, I'm so sorry. Okay, so our opening request is for the Vermont State Grant Programs, the full-time, part-time, and advancement grant. That is level funding. And it is, the governor recommended it, VSAC requested it, and the House also recommended level funding for that.
The trades is in there.
The trades is the very next line. We're asking for $1 million, as I mentioned. Both the governor and the House supported that request.
And then the base that you want for 802 opportunity.
Correct. Then 802 opportunity is next, and that is a $3.4 million request, and that is the same level funding that we have this year. The difference between the governor and what BSAC requested and the House supported was that we are asking for that to be in base. We also asked for $300,000. We added dates for an aspiration program. This is a program that we haven't talked about today, but it is when we go into schools that may have low rates of aspiration, especially between second generation and first generation students, trying to help increase those aspiration rates.
You have the map on that because you targeted certain areas. Windsor, I think, was one area, Lamoille was another. Is that,
I don't believe it's in here, but we certainly can make it available
We'll make
to
it
you.
available.
because there was great variation around the state in terms of
Absolutely.
that experience.
Absolutely.
Still at ECU.
I believe so, but I need to go back and check.
I think
We're
So
also,
that's the
The
closest.
tech center at Spalding was another place we've had. The governor did not recommend that, and the House also did not recommend that. The last thing that we are asking for, although not in our base, is the stipend. So for dual enrollment,
We know about that.
Yeah,
perfect, and I will
It
say no
came out
more.
of here.
yeah, it did.
Senator Westman, we're talking about kids from families with limited income can't access in the cost of transportation and books and so.
That's exactly right.
There's one other piece of the House, but in the one time, the credential of value. Advance of the month.
Oh, yes, Vermont.
It's in the House bill.
yes. So Advance Vermont was an initiative. Tom Cheney should be the one to come in and kind of speak to that. Advance Vermont was an initiative that initially we stood up with UVM and the state colleges, which was intended to be a collective, kind of a collective action group focused on trying to increase the post-secondary education aspiration continuation rates. And Tom has been working with the House. We have served as the backbone agency just for purposes of kind of funding
The fiscal.
agent for them. And Tom will come in and talk about.
And so the appropriation was made to you as the fiscal. and
Yeah, it's
administering
with the idea there would be a sub-grant through
And
to,
that's how much?
350.
But that wasn't, that was something that,
that was not part of VSEC's program.
It was part of their sort of workforce
oh,
package in the House.
What we have done this time in terms of our presentation, I think last year we came in with both the list of the workforce, the other workforce related issues. We have provided a page that has on the back side the additional workforce specific pieces that were appropriated in the House. And Maryland would be happy to talk about those in detail if you
Is
want information.
this?
You are live. We can't go live, so we're
I'll forward you an
You're
email
what?
from Tom.
Okay.
we're waiting for
Talk
the
about-
text to get us live so we can have a meeting.
sorry to hear
Double
that.
checking just to see if it's just us.
Well,
And go to our,
I'm gonna suggest, because we are really stacked, I feel like an airport, you know, after a weather event and where the number of planes and fuel. And so, I'm gonna suggest that we look at the material and then if any have information or more information, either some of it might tie into when Agency of Education comes in as well, but otherwise we can rely on Senator Perus to follow up. So, we should do that. And I know you've got some really good staff, very committed, they go to great lengths. So thank you for coming in and giving us. And if we look through it, we'll probably find you, the data is here to answer the questions that we might have. But if not, we'll get back to you. All right.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to come in and kind of Sharon, in the chat. And, in closing, you all have been extraordinarily supportive of us. More importantly, you've been really supportive of our students.
Yeah.
Over the course of the last several years, and we're grateful for that. As I said at the opening, if you notice, we came in with close to a level funded budget, knowing how tight things are going to be this year, with our core request that, trades and income opportunity be included in base, because they demonstrate, the power of the concept.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So enjoy your weekend, or maybe you're going back to work. So we're going to move on to the Office of Child, Youth, and Family Advocate, which is a new office that we have created.
I'll have.
So, started here, and we have a document that outlines the budget request. I guess the last page. So obviously, you're a new office that got created, and I know that there were high aspirations in terms of what the impact of the office could have in terms of how our youth are served and families are served. So do you want to just give us, and I apologize for the shortness of time, but we're just trying to get through as many budget requests as we possibly can. And maybe the policy committees have had you come in and get an update.
We're getting ready to.
Okay.
We will be in, yeah.
I've been to HHS.
We've been trying to meet, so.
All right.
Herculean efforts on this part.
So if you want to get started, I
Sure.
suspect your budget request is fairly straightforward on your ups and downs sheet, but you want to just sort of fill us in terms of you're the new director, and so you're starting out with a whole new organizational entity, and would be, I'm sure we would all be very interested to see from your perspective how the office has developed and the work ahead of you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm Matthew Bernstein. I'm sorry, Mrs. Brenda.
I'm Brenda Baird, Deputy Secretary, Deputy Chief Financial Officer of AOA Financial Services Division. I'm just here to support Matt because I helped him create the budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and so my title is the Child, Youth, and Family Advocate, or the Director of the Office. I'm currently the only employee. I have tried to summarize as much as I could about the mission here. I'm not sure the level of familiarity, but if you look at page 2 of 7, you'll see the goals of this office. And
the bill that created the office had to come through this committee.
So there you are. So I won't spend a lot of time.
Yeah. So, and I know it was something that was proposed and subject to several pieces of legislation over time. So
there was quite some time, is my understanding. So, so it's an exciting opportunity. I think this office aims to be sort of light on its feet and to balance listening to the community and translating that into policy and information for the public, but also all of you and the executive branch and the courts as well. So it's a big scope and a very small office right now. In terms of, and please jump in with questions because I'm just, I'd be happy to clarify anything. As you see the stat in the middle of page 2, there's some good data on ombudsman offices, which is loosely what this is. Returning, having a high return on investment. So I do think, a dollar here is well spent. In terms of the budgetary request.
Could you explain that every
Yes.
dollar spent in overall by the state or child welfare programs? Could you?
The stat here?
When you said
or
you average a return of $22 for every dollar spent, I was just wondering
Yeah.
where the $22, and I expect it would be in a variety of places.
Yeah.
That any savings would be. Obviously, one of our goals that we've had is to bend the curve of the number of children that are coming into the custody of the state, because we're an outlier compared to many other states. And it raised the question, why? What do we need to do? We even had the study, I'm sure you looked at the study from UVM. And we were finding that there wasn't an indication that children didn't come in when it was not warranted. But nevertheless, it raised the questions of why, because every state, and actually when you look at our ranking, we rank better in terms of poverty and, healthcare coverage and so many of the metrics. And it was like, well, what is behind this? So
I was just talking about this morning. I think it would be interesting to have that part of the kids count report, but just to isolate the child welfare part. And I'm not sure that exists. If it does, I will find it. But I think the ranking in that would be quite a bit lower, unfortunately, because of what you just discussed, the number of children taken into custody, disproportionate to both to Black children, as is the case across the country, but also to white children. So obviously Vermont is primarily white, but we take in too many children of all kinds into foster care. And that's a complex problem. And I think, I'm glad that you're tuned into that specific data point. I think part of the job of this office is to continue to ask questions on that. And, in a, nonpartisan, transparent and informational way for all parties. In other words, I met with the DCF higher ups last week, and I think we share a lot of the same goals, right? It helps DCF too to have fewer kids in custody. Obviously, we want the right kids in custody, which is not the best way to say it. We want children in custody who cannot be in their homes safely, right? And if they can be in their homes safely, then we want them in their homes. And that's we, meaning everybody, federal law, state law, DCF, that's a shared goal. So I think, that's it's a question that is it's a goal and a question that's fairly easy to pose. I think solving that problem is tricky. And there's a lot of different moving parts there. But I do think it's achievable. And I think the advantage of an office like this is, the design of an office like this is to really be plugged into all of those entities. So for example, I'm a lawyer, which helps me understand legal systems. And I've worked in the child welfare system quite a bit. But because I'm not working as a lawyer right now, I can go to the judiciary and say, I would like to be able to sit this office. I would like folks in this office to be able to sit in the back of any courtroom in the state when necessary to observe with proper notice to the parties, of course. And to be able to meet with DCF, to be able to talk to policymakers, it helps knit across all of those, sometimes siloed entities to make sure that the systems are functioning as they should. Because if we have shared goals, then let's get there, right? And one more thing I guess I would say is, I think if you take the DCF computer system, which is slightly older than it, I think, but it's a big problem, and everybody, you're probably well aware of this. But part of the issue is that it's a costly investment now. That's a long-term investment that won't pay dividends for quite some time. And there's a lot of issues like that in child welfare. And it's always a balance, right? We can't just throw money at a problem. On the other hand, we have to plan for the long term. And I can't think of a more cost-effective and smarter investment than children. It's like a cliche, but it's also just, if you look at raw numbers, investing in kids early on, preventing trauma, helping kids who have experienced trauma, address it at a younger age, prevents, there's tons of data on this, right? Prevents myriad problems later. And incarcerating somebody of any age is both, awful for the person and also very expensive for the state, and not just expensive in dollars, but in ripple effects on families, etc. So I'll stop talking, but yeah.
Well, one of the things we struggle with, and that is when you're building a budget, we have to keep within what we have for available revenues. And how oftentimes we start up programs or providers come and say, you should fund our services. And at some point, I don't think we're as good as we need to be. And that is, once they're in place, they sort of continue. And the challenge is, are we making the investments in the right place? How do we make sure that when we're setting priorities, that we're, out of maybe of several different options around child support, child protective services, where to put that first dollar. And I think we really try to do our best, but one of the things from the UVM study indicated Vermont as a state, which is kind of surprising, and I don't know how they define what, I think this is out of the Casey maybe data, didn't spend as much money on prevention as other states. And I think sometimes how you define prevention can be very narrow or it could be much broader. And sometimes things you do, in fact, have a very complementary impact, but people aren't necessarily connecting them or counting them. And so I think this is, from a budget perspective, this is something that we really struggle with in terms of where we should make that first dollar investment. And then if you try to redirect it, well, you know how difficult that is once
Sure.
something gets up. So having that independent and ability to look at how systems work and what the current evidence base is and the extent to which what we're funding aligns with that is something that we try to do the best we can, but obviously once you get a program in place, it takes on its own constituency, and it's very hard to say the evidence would suggest we should be spending more money here and less here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. And I think, again, you all are one of the constituencies of this office. This office every December has to come to the legislature, to the General Assembly, to the governor, and issue a report, right? And what is in that report? I mean, it's partially spelled out in statute, which is listed on page. It is listed on page 4, I believe. Nope, that's not true.
Are you looking at a DCF report? You have a DCF report.
Anyway, so it's conditions for kids in custody, data by race, and policy recommendations is essentially what it boils down to. But if you all have a specific question, or in general the legislature, the General Assembly has a specific question, within reason, that's something that this office can answer and can bring to the table. And not just every December 1st, but it's a policy arm of the public, centered on children and youth and families. So, and I'd also say that call about what to focus time and energy on is a question, an internal question too, right? Because the mandate of this office is so big. And again, I love the balance of talking to the community, talking to kids who are in institutions, talking to family, talking to DCF, being on the front lines, and then having a policy obligation and a policy arm. Those two things really inform each other and they need each other. So I think that's an important issue. In terms of prevention, the other thing that happened is that in 2018, the federal funding structure changed with Title 4E and Title 4B of the Social Security Act. So there is more.
4B is still, isn't that still capped? Isn't that a capped entitlement? 4B.
Seriously.
Oh, Senator Sears, your hand's up. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Senator
That's all right. No, that's fine.
Sears, Sherry, in case
I'm a member of the this committee and also chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And my question really is, I saw your summary of duties and authority on page 2. Provide information to the public. That's pretty clear. Analyze and monitor developments in law and policy. I suppose that's keeping track of some of the things we do and policies of DCF. And then number 3 is receive and investigate complaints. And I'm curious as to what does that mean? For example, does it mean that if a mother complains that her child was taken in DCF custody, you're the place to call to get that complaint resolved or at least looked into? does it mean that the grandfather who and I've had both recently, by the way, that's why I'm asking. The grandfather who feels his two children should be with his son, not with his daughter-in-law, who has a substance abuse problem. I mean, what level do you see the role of the Office of Child, Youth, and Family Advocate in terms of number 3?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator Sears. I think the short answer is yes to both of those constituencies. They would be, and I think it's still an open question of exactly the scope, how we frame this, right? But I guess I would at the beginning encourage, folks like that to reach out. I think, part of this is models in other states, and those are guidance, but not, right? We might do it differently here in Vermont. But definitely in both of those hypotheticals you laid out, those would be folks who I would want to encourage to contact our office. I think the trick is, we can't investigate every single complaint that reaches our office. And that, there's arrows that point back to public information in some cases, but for a serious case in which a family feels like, the policy and procedure isn't being followed, or the law isn't being followed, or they've had a raw deal, that would be the constituency of this office. And in an ideal world, a quick call to DCF would remedy that. I think obviously that's pretty ideal. So I don't know if you wanted to follow up on your question, but I think that's the short.
No, I think it's an answer. I could see it as for one person or 2-person office, 3-person. I could see you getting swamped just dealing with complaints, because and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, that other senators and representatives get the same complaints. But and they run the gamut. People really, I had one couple that was constantly calling me because DCF was keeping their kids. I did contact DCF, and they were helpful, but there's only so much they can do, and they can tell us. So it makes our jobs very difficult in terms of trying to represent people. And one of the things that frustrates me is that I hear these complaints from both those that are taken into DCF custody and those that aren't, and people think they should be. And, as Senator Kitchell mentioned, we have a higher than average group going in, but I wonder sometimes, given the dysfunction in many families, if that's not part of the cause. So, but I think you've answered my question.
One of the comments, so just to follow up on Senator Sears, we had a lot of discussion about investigate, because how you interpret investigate would mean you have investigated and you have the ability to bring, legal action, et cetera. And that was not envisioned, and I was back looking at the language, and I think you take them and you review them and you follow up with the entities to find out if the complaint actually has a basis, and push for the remedy, or in fact the system has done its work properly. So investigate. In our discussion last year when we were considering the bill, we spent a lot of time in terms of what do we have for expectations of this ombuds position, and so investigate was one of those terms, and what that meant.
Yeah, and Senator Sears, I would just add to that. Number one, this office has discretion about what to investigate, which I think is important. Number two, the insider status of this, again, the ombuds concept, the statute provides for access to records, right? So, you as a senator, it's a little bit dicey if you're, you don't want to request a bunch of confidential records from DCF, or if you did, they might not give you them anyway, right? But this office has the ability to do that. It has the ability to go to facilities and show up and say, I would like to come inside, even unannounced. And again, being inside these confidential court hearings is also important. And then, the problem you just described is exactly it, right? The system is both over-inclusive and under-inclusive. In other words, some children are left in homes that they should be removed from, and some children are removed from homes that they could probably safely remain in. And that's the trick. It's complicated, and which is sometimes it's more obvious than other times, right? And so yeah, I would just leave it at that. But I think this office, I think partly from you all, the idea of this office is to overcome a couple of those barriers, and you all have given this office the tools to do that in a way that's different than any one entity, DCF or the courts or any of you can do on your own.
And Alliance.
Yeah, so all this discussion brings up the discussion that we had in our committee last year with writing the bill, but then also during the interview process with the oversight committee over the summer and fall. And I think that some of the gray areas and the issues that you're talking about are not going to be resolved until we really see how the office organize itself. And so they're important conversations, no question about it, especially when you start talking about investigation.
So how long have you been in the position?
This week.
1 week. We did, when did you start?
I started January, it says it on
Right.
January 27th.
January
I
27th.
must admit that it was, yes, I was still tying up details of my previous job at that
Are
time.
you
So,
from another state?
I live, yes is the short answer. I do not.
I hope
plan
you
to be
have
remote.
housing.
He hasn't been into my committee for his confirmation hearing
I
yet,
just
so this is
wanted to,
great.
and we were just having a long discussion on housing, so I hope you've got a roof over your head.
Yes, well, I've made the wise, or some might say not, choice of living with my in-laws as well. So we combined forces, and we have a multi-generational household in which the caretaking.
Oh, we're
so,
encouraging that,
I actually think it's great. What I like to say is it's better to live with my in-laws than my parents, but don't tell them, okay? Hi, Mom.
Particularly when you've got large houses, we want multi-generation.
Yeah, no, I mean, but of course that's a serious issue for right. And I came most recently from Vermont Legal Aid, where it's housing all the time, and I learned a ton about how real the crisis is, which is very useful. But I came from New Mexico. I lived in Vermont from 2002 to 2004, and met my now wife and dragged her back to New Mexico for 15 years, and then we had kids, and now we're back here closer to family. So it's my turn to travel adventures. So yeah.
Wow, that's great. Well, we're glad to have you in the position, and it sounds like your background is really wonderful to come in and take something that's new and sort of define it and build it.
It suits me. I like to be multidisciplinary more than I'm a litigator type of attorney, at the policy side. I also wanted to say, if I share everyone's concern about our capacity to investigate, and if you would like to fund 3 full-time positions today, we can bump up the budget by a couple hundred. I think that's what you were proposing, right, Senator Sears? If I could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Kidding, everyone.
I'll send you the names and you can decide what to do.
Yeah.
But let me know. I'm dead serious that I'm sure every senator and rep gets these complaints, maybe me more than others, I don't know. But it's heartbreaking because there is little you can do. And I hear it from both sides,
Well, Senator Sears, if you look at the ups and downs sheet, there is a request and the governor's recommend to add 2 positions,
Right.
according to the sheet.
I didn't understand how that matches
So
up with
the
the budget.
governor's recommend is actually 250, I think, right? And we're asking for 408.
The governor's recommend is 408. According to the ups and downs.
Oh.
And it shows add 2 positions and the software and outreach and so forth.
Okay.
But because it's new, all the,
Oh, it was, the 163 was added by the House.
Yes, that's probably why you see the 408 that was added by the House, but it wasn't in the governor's original budget, I don't believe. It was
Oh.
250 in the governor's original budget, but
Well,
that doesn't even cover the 2 positions, so including all the other expenses.
Well, but agency of administration prepared this?
Yes, I prepared that, and I apologize, it does say governor's, it's just the standard format that we use, and I didn't pay attention to the fact
I
that it
think it
says.
might have been a recommend from finance and management to catch up in the House.
I think they're aware that it needs to be raised, and it's just
Okay,
agreement.
well, we'll take a look at it.
Disagreement about how much.
Senator Starr, you had a question?
Well, I was just wondering, where are you located? And I see you got.
And what's your phone number in case we get constituent calls,
Yes.
right?
His card.
No, I noticed you had to pay for space in there. So what do you have, what are we paying for?
Now, where's your office, I guess?
Well,
We're paying for here.
what are they getting for 33 grand?
I bet he's in state-owned space, and this is under the fee for space formula.
I'll just let you keep guessing and.
That is true, but that is not necessarily where
So it's a little bit complicated, the answer to that question. There is no office yet. So I'm right now, I am the office and I'm working out of my home, unfortunately.
Oh, so this is an anticipatory
However,
expense.
Well, somewhat. So I've looked at a number of different spaces. The office will be situated, I've made the decision to situate the office in Chittenden County for now for a couple of reasons.
Well, where the population.
Sure, it's where the population is. It's where the population is expanding. It's the most diverse, county in the state, and it also shows a bit of independence from, the office is supposed to be independent, and the optics of that are important. So if we were, in the Montpelier sort of state office orbit, I think that would send a different message to the constituency. So I've looked at a couple of different spaces. There is only currently one state vacancy in Chittenden County, which is doesn't have windows and also is getting new carpet. It's like not really ready for anybody. So I looked with VGS at a number of different private places. I think the one I'm leaning towards right now is a small office in the south end of Burlington. When the deputy is hired, which it will be probably within 2 months, I would say, they may be by coincidence in Brattleboro, they may be in in Montpelier. If they're in the southern part of the state, I think it could make sense to have another small office there, whether it's state or private, so that part of, because this is a statewide entity, right? So that person can be based there and sort of, visit facilities, DC offices, et cetera. So I think that the projected cost it's based on a bigger office in Chittenden County, and it's based on real figures that I've gotten. But I think it also could represent those 2 offices as well. So it's a little bit, there's a lot of variables.
Can I ask where in the south end?
You can and you may.
Thank you.
What is the name of that street? Sort of in that tech area.
Yeah,
Flynn Avenue?
Yes, no, I can find you the actual name of the street, but you know where, it's right next to Citizen Cider, actually, you know where that is?
Oh, yeah.
Pretend you don't if you do.
Yeah.
So.
Senator Lyons says you're in her neighborhood.
That's my district.
Okay, well.
So forget,
So that's a placeholder, we don't really.
so forget about Senator Baru.
We can make a deal on it.
You ever
Might have some
thought
extra
about
space.
relocating to the kingdom?
Get more bang for your buck.
Right, the rent is cheaper.
No, I mean, in seriousness though, I do think, there could be value in smaller offices around the state long term.
Well, it sounds like a lot to be to put in place and determine.
Did you think about locating with legal aid? I know they have that, yes, okay.
Yes, they themselves, it was proposed that this office be situated there, as I'm sure you know, right?
Yeah.
The acting, I can't speak for them, but I will say that the impression I got was that they felt like there's potential, at least optical conflicts of interest there in terms of constituencies served. I don't really see it like that. They don't have a lot of space.
I know, there's people
Consider
going
it.
in and out a lot, and I know it's an old building.
So I, I hate to rush, but we,
Yeah.
are already, a little behind. We have the Ethics Commission coming in next. So I think probably you're gonna have more discussion. Senator Lyons, of course, chairs Health and Welfare, and Senator Sears, Judiciary. And so we have two members of our committee that are really very, because of their other committees, very connected to child welfare issues, policies, and juvenile issues, particularly in judiciary. So unless there are further questions, your budget's pretty straightforward. And appreciate having you come in this afternoon.
Thank you, yeah.
I look forward to working with you and how your office and having the benefit of the work that you're going to do to help us sort of inform policy and decisions about funding.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, I will depend on you all as well for your expertise because, you know, I know a lot, but I certainly have a lot to learn. So please
Some of us
reach
have
out.
been around quite a long time.
Um,
As you can tell by the looks of this.
Position.
Yeah.
I don't have any more room in my computer.
Yeah, sure you do. So, and I would say, so the email for the office email, like if you meet somebody, Senator Sears, if you feel like you want to refer somebody, is OCYFA@vermont.gov. I'm sorry, I should have put that on the list. The OCYFA, Office of Child, Youth and Family Advocate @vermont.gov. And mine is Matthew.Bernstein@vermont.gov.
That's all Vermont.
So I would just say that, you know, if you could pick and choose what you send to me right now, because we don't have a phone. I'm not giving out my cell phone number. You all can have it if you want. I'm not giving it out to the public because I don't think it would stop ringing. Eventually we'll have a hotline set up once the office is established to receive calls, but there's all of these, you know, catch-22s. So, but that email OCYFA, if you want to, you know, give that to folks, that's absolutely okay. And, you know, just with I think the messaging that the capacity of the office is ramping up, but,
Understood.
so thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I really appreciate your commitment and knowledge about these issues. It's important. I think we.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're now on to the Ethics Commission. Are you all there for the ethics too?
I'm on ethics as well, yes, but I don't see Chris, so maybe.
They're in the
I'll
hallway?
send them in.
Oh, okay.
They're being respectful. which is nice.
Well, enjoy your.
Thank you all. Thank you. If anybody would like my phone number, please
Oh,
ask.
all right. Thank you very much.
What's the difference between this? Up and down, and then this.
I think it was just giving you more detail of what the line
Yeah,
items
yeah, I
are.
think, yeah, that's, I asked that
Yes.
too. Detail.
There are
So it gives you
numbers,
the,
or just-
you know,
Can you tell me what the-
Except one's 413 and the other's
Yeah.
408.
Everybody got it.
yeah, and 413 is what went into the budget bill from the House.
Like this number. It's not a lot different. And then I wonder. Positions that are 161.
Yes.
Is this the total numbers, or these are also up and down?
So
I guess it's the only, because I guess I thought two people was that much, but I guess you only have one person now, so that kind of makes sense.
There's, yeah, there are things in the after.
The goal was.
In my list that went out.
Yes,
was what?
yes.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't know if I was missing.
I'll just close the door and then we'll get started.
I have it somewhere. She's good. Oh, yeah, she is.
So we are going to get going. Sorry, we're a little running behind. And so we have the State Ethics Commission budget to consider next, and Executive Director. So if you want to put yourself on record, and we can go through just a quick update about what your office does and what the request, the budget request is. It's, you know, don't mean to minimize it, but relative to some of the budgets that come before us, it's pretty straightforward. So welcome, and thank you for being available on such short notice. You may have been rescheduled 3 or 4 times by now. All right.
First try, no. Yeah, so I'm Christina Severett. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont State Ethics Commission. I think this is my 2nd year before you. So the Ethics Commission essentially, we have kind of 2 main roles, and one is to provide services, which come in the form of advice and guidance, and then also we accept complaints. So advice and guidance is restricted, or its availability is restricted to public servants serving the state of Vermont, and the complaint channel is available to all members of the public, which includes state of Vermont public servants. So that is one aspect of what we do, and the other aspect is to continue to advocate for building out the ethics framework in Vermont, because I think as many people know, Vermont is quite behind the ball in terms of ethics laws and the ethics framework. So it's an ongoing project, and so that is another one of our key functions.
And we have quite a package of information here. Obviously, we're funding you all through internal service fund charges. Then is that how we did that? Looks it.
That was always the.
Through HR.
We set it up that way.
I think
And then
we did.
we codified it.
Yeah.
We had a sunset.
Yeah.
Made it permanent.
They're funded through the HR fund, internal service fund, but they also got a one-time general appropriation last year for their half-time position.
And the budget, the governor has submitted is 189, almost 190,000. According to this sheet here. And your position is half-time, is that how that would work?
Yeah, so we have 2 employees, both of us are part-time. There's myself, and we have 1 administrative assistant. That position had started a little bit, almost a year and a couple of months ago.
And so today, and this would be for 20 in the past year then, in terms of the volume of complaints, inquiries, and requests, that would have been for calendar year 2022.
Yes. And so I should point out that we actually changed how we count complaints this year compared to last year. So we separated them out between complaint inquiries and actual, written complaints that were formally submitted to us. So last year we had 3 complaints, formal written complaints submitted to us. This year we've already surpassed that number. And we had 12 complaint inquiries, which means somebody called us, was interested in making a complaint, and didn't follow up for some reason, or we discussed it with them and it didn't quite like the ethics framework. Yeah.
If you'd like to just give us a little bit of, from your perspective, how the, how the commission is working. You said we're kind of behind other states.
Yeah.
And the sort of the work ahead, as well as, I think probably at the end, we would have the ups and downs sheet, I think, right? That, which is page 19.
So let's see, it's 19.
Page 19. Okay. All right.
Sure. So the history of the Ethics Commissions, I've only been with it for a couple of years, but I believe it was started because Vermont ranked close to the bottom of all 50 states in a national survey when it comes to ethics framework. So it ranked, it received an F grade for judicial accountability, legislative accountability, and executive branch accountability. And one of the big things was that there was no ethics commission in place, independent ethics commission. And generally that's associated with the ethics commission having independent investigative and enforcement powers. And so that was how the ethics commission came to being. I think at that time there was a vision that there would be a binding code of state ethics, meaning that there would be an enforcement protocol associated with the code of ethics, and that the ethics commission would have investigative authority and enforcement powers. So it's been a very slow process. As you know, we just got the code of ethics put into law last year. So before then, we've been relying on different agencies' policies that were related to ethics. Some of them have not been updated, possibly still updated for more than 20 years. So now we have the state code of ethics, that is the law in the state. However, there is no enforcement protocol in place. And so that has increased the workload for the Ethics Commission in the sense that we now have training responsibilities. We developed a training for all state of Vermont employees last year. Over 6,000 people have taken the online training. We also do in-person trainings upon request. However, what the vision was for the Ethics Commission when it was stood up versus where we are now, we're quite behind our own vision, as well as still quite behind when we look at the other 50 states. So for example, this year we have some pending legislation related to financial disclosures. That would be for executive officers and for candidates running for office. So there are 48 states that require financial disclosure, and there is one state that does not have a penalty written into law if somebody does not file, and that is Vermont. So just to give you an example of where things stand for Vermont compared to other states. And so right now for the past.
So let me ask, we're asked to fill out a disclosure form on holdings and what our income is.
Penalty.
But
It's
if
a
you don't
penalty
fill
for
it
not
out,
filing.
there's no penalty.
But there's no penalty.
Just like not filing a campaign finance report then.
You get a stern look from Bloomberg.
I see.
Yes, yes. And so this year we were looking at penalties, and these are modest penalties.
On the other hand, under the Constitution, we have to sanction ourselves. So one might think that we could, for a legislator who fails to comply with that, be subject to our own sanctioning authority.
Our own ethics panel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So this
my,
case works.
my opponent never filed.
Well, that was a campaign finance.
That's-
And so in our case, we're actually talking about candidate financial disclosure, so that's the category. So we're not talking about that just disclosures that are for legislators. And so this is actually, the legislation that's being proposed is actually an incumbent friendly one, because incumbents usually file their financial disclosure forms. But, we are the only state that requires financial disclosures for candidates, or has required financial disclosures, but there's no penalty in place. So the proposal is a very modest $10 a day late filing fee, and that's after people have been given notice, and they have a 5-day window in which to file, and the penalty would start accruing on the 6th day.
It's just for the financial disclosure, not the finance campaign finance.
No, just for candidate financial disclosure.
Which is only for the statewide races.
No, it would be for people running for state, senate, state.
'Cause right now, we don't have to do it like that.
Candidate.
Candidate.
Part of, you're talking about what we submit to the Secretary of State's office.
Right.
So we all do that. So she's saying if someone doesn't do
Remember
it.
financial.
Well, there are people that don't have
Your
to.
Twitter does it for you.
I thought it was only for certain offices, higher offices.
It's part of the problem. If you don't raise $500, you don't have to report or to spend.
Oh,
That's
I
it.
think we're complaining
Yeah,
two
yeah.
things, one of which is campaign contributions
Yeah.
and campaign reporting, and the other is, as an individual
Personal.
candidate, what is my personal income?
Yes.
And I don't ever remember that either.
Yeah, I don't
Are we
think-
all violators here?
I did check, well, no, I checked through the House as best as I can also. No violators on the House side, I actually don't know about the Senate side. But yeah, it is a required disclosure when you file to run, and
Oh, I think maybe I do.
What is the disclosure exactly?
so it's, I think it's very short, it's very modest compared to
Yes.
other states as well. And so basically it asks you to report your income over $5,000, what is the source of that income? If you have
That's
more than
after we get
10%
elected.
ownership.
For candidates.
The candidates are required to file this information as well. So if you have more than 10% ownership in a company, do you have, are you interested on any boards and commissions? So it's actually the same form that executive officers are required to file annually. So with candidates, it's only when you are running for office. With executive officers, it's annually. So the legislation would cover both executive officers and candidates, and it would be a very modest penalty. And I can actually send you, we have a chart of what it looks like in all 50 states. So the $10 a day penalty is at the very low end of the scale.
But there's no penalty, so.
No, yeah, The penalty now, if someone doesn't file or,
Senator Sears, you had a comment?
No, John Bloomberg gives those to us at the beginning of the session.
That's different. That's after we've been elected. This is before, while you're a candidate.
Oh, yeah, I don't remember if I filed that or not.
It is required.
On record is saying we don't know.
It is a legal requirement, and with the legislation passage, you'd be getting a reminder from the Ethics Commission saying that we don't have this on record for you. Here's your opportunity to.
Well, would the
file this
Secretary
now.
of State elections division help us, remind us, or what?
Where do we get that from?
The form should be a part of your candidate filing package.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, well, then we hope.
No, they probably did it.
Where did it go into?
You caused us,
You're causing a lot of problems.
you've given us a project for the weekend.
Yes, yeah.
It does say that we have to do it, but I don't see the form. Like, you think they put the form right where it says, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
like I said,
Or you fill one out for each other.
Oh.
Well, I can say that, as part of this legislation, so yes, it is filed with it goes to the Secretary of State's office now, and it's posted on their website, and the executive officer form is posted on the Ethics Commission website. So right now, I think, Secretary of State's office is at capacity in terms of their ability to handle the forms. And so the Ethics Commission will be volunteering to take over some responsibilities related to the form and tracking them to make sure that everyone gets them. That's it.
all right, thank you for that information.
Review of what hopefully is coming your
You
way.
see, there's a line item here that says revenue fines, legislators.
I've seen.
This is a good opportunity to note that we fully expect to be spending more than we're receiving in. So this is really just a part of building out the ethics framework in Vermont to make sure that we're moving forward instead of, staying at a standstill.
That is interesting. Other questions or additional information you want to share with us relative to your, work of the office?
Yeah, sure. And so as you probably know, with the new code of ethics, there was a training requirement. It requires everyone serving the state of Vermont, that's state government. So that includes some categories of volunteers as well as state Vermont employees to take state code of ethics training. And there are multiple training providers who can give the training. I believe that the House Ethics Panel gave a training earlier this session. I don't know if the Senate Ethics Panel has done the same, but those are both approved training providers. The other approved training providers include the Ethics Commission and the executive branch, CAPS. And so as far as I know, CAPS and the Ethics Commission, we joined together and created a training. So they handled the technical part, we handled the substantive part. And so we created an online training. And I think that's the only one that's available. Or the only offices that actually created that type of training now.
Other states have done online
Yes.
training as well.
Yes.
So were you able to borrow some of the work that they've done? Or?
We did not borrow some of the work that we've done, but we worked with a consultant.
I don't mean to imply plagiarism or anything.
Well, so the code of ethics training is specific to our code of ethics. So it's not a general ethics training. It's based on our code of ethics. And so that is available online. And I actually checked with CAPS, and it is available to all senators as of last week. So if anyone would like to take it, it's 45 minutes long, and it is required. So it's required for anyone who is new to government, taking it within the first 90 days, and then for everyone else every 3 years. So it's available now, and we have had over 6,000 people take it, and those numbers are in our annual report if you have them. Yeah, and so that has increased awareness among people about the Ethics Commission exists and what services we offer. So when people were taking the training, there's a large amount of people taking it last fall, we did generally we saw an increase in people calling us for guidance and advice and using our services. And that's carried through this year somewhat in the sense that we are getting different types of questions from different people this year, so that we've seen before.
Can you give an example of the kinds of inquiry you're getting? Where
Yeah.
people are really seeking your help with what constitutes a violation and the required action.
Sure, and so there are different categories that we receive with the most requests, and so those are related to conflicts of interest, misuse of position, preferential treatment, and gifts. And so those are, most often, they fall into those 4 categories. And so I'd say there's like 2 types of questions that want to ask about their own actions because they want to know, is what I'm doing right? I want to make sure that things are correct. And the other category would kind of creep more into like complaint inquiries. They see something that's happening that they think is wrong, and they're interested in potentially filing a complaint, but first they want to know, am I correct in thinking this is wrong, and would it fall under the code of ethics? Yeah, and so generally speaking, requests for rights and guidance, they don't really follow a pattern. Sometimes we get 3 calls in a day, and sometimes it's not for 2 weeks. And so we offer informal advice, not over the phone. You don't even have to tell us your name, or you can send an email with a question. If it's something that's very complicated, then we might, refer to other members of the commission for discussion about it before we get back to the person. And for somebody who has a more complicated question or wants it to be in writing and made public, then they can ask for an advisory opinion. And so we do redact personally identifying information unless somebody waives their own. And in some cases, people will do that because they want to either ask if something is correct, and sometimes they want clarification, like I am doing this, somebody else doesn't think this is correct, what should I do? And so those are generally for complicated questions or questions where we think that the public or a greater number of people would benefit from the answer because they'll be posted on our website. And so last year we had 2 requests, and it is more of a time-consuming process because it's a written opinion. The entire commission looks at it. We do have in our policy, in our procedures related to ethics, related to advisory opinions. We have a place where we can ask other branches of government if it affects them or implicates their policies to weigh in and make comments on the opinion. So we had 2 requests for an advisory opinion last year. One is posted on our website. The other one we converted to a request for guidance because it was very time sensitive, and so we didn't have enough time to come up with the complete written opinion. So if anybody wants to see an example of an advisory opinion, we do have the one posted. It's kind of slow going with the advisory opinions. It didn't really, I guess, it wasn't really something that people were seeking before the code of ethics went into place because it would have just been very general guidance. But now there's this framework, this legal framework in place, so it makes more sense for people to start requesting them now.
Back to the financial disclosure part, which I did find, and I do remember it now that I see it. But are those public? Like
Yes.
so you could, I couldn't. Where is those?
Secretary of State.
Secretary of State's office. I think
Search for
there's a link that brings you to a spreadsheet. At the end of that spreadsheet, there's another link that brings you to the form.
Could you check to see if we're in?
Well, that's what I was gonna check.
See if
Like,
we are.
We did get calls from our office asking for help finding it, so I had to look it up.
Maybe Senator Pertwee needs some help then how to navigate.
If you look on our website, you can see the executive officer form. So there's a button that says financial disclosures, executive officer, financial
well,
disclosures.
if you did this financial disclosure, that took me back to the Secretary of State's page.
Oh, for candidates, if you want to see executive officers, those are posted on our website,
But not
but
candidate.
not candidates.
What about elected? I thought those are executive officers.
Executive
What-
officers, we include the statewide, yeah, so attorney general,
Not
lieutenant
state
governor, governor.
reps and state senators.
No, those would go under the Secretary of State's office if you filed any with candidates, and then I do know you have to file other forms as legislators, which I don't know what.
But is that
those are supposed to
is
be.
that in a database, like a public facing?
That is something we don't have anything to do with, so I don't know. I only know that the candidates are posted and the executive officers are
I
posted.
bet
and the
it
rest I don't know.
is. We
I
just
guess
don't
we
know how to
can,
access.
I guess all the candidates, so you have to be a candidate to get elected. Turns out, so then it would be there,
Unless you're writing.
right, or appointed.
All right, other questions?
I guess if you're right, you can't.
So there's one legislator who has done the training.
What?
There's one legislator who's done the training.
Are you the one?
No, I did it as a state employee.
Oh, okay.
Well, then there may be at least 2.
Maybe it was Rebecca White.
And I would say we're only tracking the ones who took the online training, so anyone who took the House or Senate ethics panel training would be tracked here.
Okay. All right.
This is an online training.
Yeah, this is for the online training, so.
Steve on.
And it previously wasn't available to legislators because CATS had to manually add all of the legislators to their system in order to make it available online. So they finished it last week because it's pretty time intensive. So I encourage anyone who's interested in checking out the training. They've done the work. So it's only 45 minutes long.
Will you send a note out that it's available?
I did. I flagged it. Yeah. Well, no, I flagged it for others, and I'll send out a reminder because I think
That'd be great.
Other questions? Budget's pretty straightforward. Thank you. Anything that we've missed here?
I don't think so.
Anything that we haven't asked you that you don't want us to
It's always
ask?
a good
No,
question.
I can just explain that the increase is due to the new employee, the part-time administrative assistant, and also our consulting and third-party contracting. So that reflects actual costs, because when the ethics commission was stood up, we had one-time funds that we've been drawing down. So now that the code of ethics is in place, we've been doing more projects. And so the operating cost increase reflects actual costs. We've just been using our one-time cost to cover for this now.
Is your office still over here? Did that get moved? That's where it's.
Yes, it's still over there. So we are a part-time office, so feel free to drop by, but I would strongly encourage you just to make
So
sure.
are you with another, are you in an office with another, with HR or somewhere else? Because there's no office on your.
Oh, it's 612. Yeah, 612. That's true.
Does the chief of police still have an office there, or he moved over here?
I have not seen an office that relates to police. So
Okay, but when they first set it up.
Security used to be in there.
Yeah.
AOA used to be in there. I used to be in there, but now it's mostly all commissioned boards. Can't remember, but security's not in there anymore.
And otherwise, we appreciate you coming in on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
But we only have, let's see, we only have 3 more boards and an agency to get through this afternoon.
I'm pretty sure they're not mine, so he won't see
No,
me.
the next one is cannabis control.
So that's not, well, they are, because he does, so.
So, according to this, we have a 15-minute break. I don't know whether they're available earlier, but
She's walking over.
I was gonna
She'll be
say,
here at 3:15.
okay, 3:15, well, we can take it. I hate to have everybody this early because we're gonna lose people and then get
I'd
us
rather
further
keep
behind.
going, but we
Well,
have
we-
anybody here.
Well, no, we don't.
They could be in the homes.
So
Okay.
just so you
On our
know,
way.
when Bloomberg comes in, Dodson's, his office is only 33% have done.
Yeah.
But that's online.
Yeah.
But they should be hundreds. Well,
But I'm just saying, he's after us all the time.
Well, it could be that they've taken a different form. We had,
this is the ethics training that you have to go online.
I
You have to do it within
understand.
9 months.
but don't we get ethics training other than online directly? I know we
We
get
do, but
that.
that's,
Have we had,
I thought we had a person, yes.
we did at the beginning of the session.
Joint fiscals at 82% and.
We didn't talk about the code of ethics at all.
It's at 33.
Well, you bring it to his attention.
I will.
I think we did with Becca last year.
I'm gonna take a break from our live stream.
Yes, we should.